here.
All right. So just letting everyone know that we're being recorded. Then Sam, when you're ready, I'm gonna go on mute and just hand everything over to you. Okay.
Okay. Can you guys see my screen okay?
Yep.
Yep, can do.
Awesome. You can see the slide deck here.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Marcus, is there anything else that you would like to add before we get into this?
No, no. I think we're all set, and I can see you as well. So thanks, Sam.
Okay, great.
We're good to go. Handing it off to
Awesome.
you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Marcus. And thank you all for joining us. I know we got some new people on the call here that weren't on the call last week. And just so you guys know, I am a PeopleSoft cash management and banking consultant at Spear MC. And I've been doing this work now since 1995. And today, what I have prepared for you is a couple of slide decks, one of which you're seeing right now. And the topics that we're going to be talking about, of course, are bank recon, the book to bank reconciliation functionality. And then I'm going to switch over to another slide deck and talk about cash management wires and EFTs, as well as acknowledgments and confirmations. Now, I realize that I'm going to be showing you a lot of functionality here. The reality is, once all of this automation is put in place, you're not going to need to do nearly what I'm going to be covering here. In fact, if I only talked about the things that you would be doing after this automation goes into effect, this would be a very short phone call. But in the true interest of full disclosure and transparency, I think it's really important for you to understand, kind of how things function, what's happening with your data, right? And how all of this comes together to give you the results that you're really looking for, right? So with that in mind, I'll kind of give us an overview here of the bank recon process. Now, last week when we met, I mentioned that there are 4 main processes that need to happen in order for you to do, the fully automated reconciliation and creation of the accounting entries and everything. And I realize I've got 5 arrows here. That's because in the previous discussion, I wasn't really including the journal generate that you would do in order to pull the accounting entries from the subledger over to the general ledger. But the other 4 that I mentioned last week, loading the bank statement, reconciling the bank statement, statement accounting, and automated accounting, all represented here, right? And so just kind of briefly, as a recap of some of the things we talked about last week, the load of the bank statement is pulling in the BAI file, BAI2 file, which is your bank statement file from your bank, right? And then once that gets loaded in, you run your auto recon process, which takes the data from the BAI file and matches it up to the transactions that are in PeopleSoft, right? Now, obviously, not everything that is on your bank statement is necessarily going to be in your BAI file. Fees, interest, wires, sweeps, those types of things won't be able to be reconciled here. We'll talk about what that looks like, but statement accounting is there to account for those things. In other words, have PeopleSoft look at those transactions, determine what they are, create an external transaction with an accounting template associated with that, which kind of stages up data for our automated accounting process. Automated accounting will look at these external transactions and create accounting entries from them and book them over in our Treasury subledger. So at a very high level, that is the stuff that we'll be going through here. And at the end of all of this, I'm going to, in this slide deck, I'm going to talk about book to bank reconciliation. This is straight up bank reconciliation, and book to bank reconciliation occurs at the end of the month, right? So when you load in a BAI2 file, it's instantiated from a run control that looks like this, right? And keep in mind, all of the processes that I'm talking about here are normally automated. In other words, they're scheduled in a job set, right? But the first thing that would happen in that job set would be the load of the BAI2 file. You have your path, your file name, the layout that's being used, and it's scheduled and it runs, right? And it populates your bank statement records. So in order to do the PeopleSoft as delivered offers 3 different ways of doing your bank reconciliation. You can do it manually, semi-manually, or auto reconciliation, which is everybody's favorite, right? But if you don't have a bank statement file, you can always use your manual option to go in and mark items in those other modules as reconciled. In other words, if you get a paper statement, this is the way, this is the type of reconciliation that you would use to mark those items as reconciled, right? Then we have semi-manual recon, which is really kind of like the Swiss Army knife of reconciliation. You can do just about anything in there. And really, when we have automated recon in place, we use semi-manual recon to work exceptions, and I'll step through an example of what that would look like, right?
Hey, Sam,
Uh-huh.
this is Lisa Whittemore.
Hi, Lisa.
Can you tell us how the BAI file is actually loaded in? Will someone on the accounting team have to pull that manually every month or every whatever the period is and upload it themselves, or can a direct feed be configured?
Great question, Lisa. So normally what happens is you tell the bank, hey, I want to receive my bank statement in a BAI2 format. And then you can go out FTP the file from their site. They'll give you a location on their server. You go
Okay.
in, pull it down, drop it in a folder on your network where you would point to right here. So it's all automated. Normally,
Okay.
those files are available, sometime before the start of business. So probably around 7 o'clock Eastern or 6 o'clock. I'm not exactly sure. I believe you guys are on Wells Fargo. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we actually, I believe we have the capabilities to run a BA file on the Wells Fargo portal.
Oh, cool.
The
Okay.
BAI v2 file is one of the ways I can download it. It gives me a bunch of options. I can pull it as like CSV, Excel, PDF, or BAI v2.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it can all be automated. There's no manual intervention usually to do this.
So essentially, Frank can set up the secure file transfer protocol and it'll just be sucked in automatically, it sounds like.
Exactly. That's the
Cool.
way I normally see it happen. Yep.
Okay.
So, any other questions about the file load? There are other options that I didn't mention here, like this advanced options piece here. We can talk about later, but it's a way of archiving all the files and everything that get in. Right? There's other features in here that we could drill down on that help you, further automate, the capabilities here. But basically, this is the page that you would be working from to run or to schedule that process. So, and I briefly touched on the semi-manual. We'll talk more about this in just a moment, but basically, semi-manual is where we're going to be taking a look at where you would work exceptions and that sort of thing. You can manually reconcile things, do like one-to-many type reconciliations where you have like one transaction on a bank statement that reconcile to many things in PeopleSoft or vice versa. You can reconcile items that for whatever reason weren't matched with the rules, and we'll look at an example of what that looks like. But the automatic reconciliation is a process that looks at the auto recon rules for bank account, right? And depending on what the utilization of that bank account actually is, whether it's an AR deposits type bank account or is strictly for AP payments, we can customize rules and associate rules to the actual functionality of these different bank accounts, right? So if I have one account whose sole function is, just it's like a concentration account, only funds other transactions, I don't have to add all those other rules to those bank accounts if I don't need them, right? So, any questions about that before I move on? Okay. So the manual reconciliation page just looks like this. You come in, enter your bank, your account, your date range, click search, and it fills this scroll buffer here. And since PeopleSoft already knows where these transactions or how this bank account's being used from the external bank account configuration, it's pulling back sources or that data from sources within different modules in PeopleSoft, right? But it's really simple. If you ever need to use the manual recon, you just select the items that reconciled. There's a button at the bottom of this page. You click reconcile and it's done, and it marks that item as reconciled in that respective module, right? So with semi-manual recon, it looks kind of the same, right? In other words, you enter your bank ID, your account, you click search, and it fills two different scroll buffers. Previously, on the manual page, I only had one. But in this case, I actually have a bank statement that I'm loading in, right? So in this example here, I've got a wire that came through on my bank statement. And in cash management, this was created as an EFT, right? So when the auto recon rules see something like that, at least the delivered ones, they're not going to reconcile straight away. They're going to look at the different types and then realize, hey, these are two different things. You could come in here and select your bank transaction, your system transaction, click reconcile and reconcile it. If you have a lot of those types of exceptions that come up, then you can always update the rules that are being associated. They're totally customizable, right? Okay. And this is an example of what I just talked about. You just click here, click reconcile, and you're done with that exception. So for auto recon rules, when you are using a fully automated reconciliation, your day kind of starts here, right? You don't necessarily need to look at much else except for what was loaded, what reconciled, what exceptions do I have to work. Now here I have an example of a bank statement that has 4 transactions, right? And this would be an example of like a concentration account, but it could be anything. So I've got 4 transactions that I've run auto recon on, and none of them reconciled, right? Because I don't, since it's a concentration account, I might not have any of those transactions like sweeps, CBAs, that sort of thing, already in here. In other words, all those transactions occurred at the bank. But if I click on the exceptions hyperlink here, then I open a page that looks like this, right? So here you can see when the auto recon process ran, it flagged it as not found in system, which is exactly right. This wire may have been instantiated at the bank, right? Or it could be a sweep, it could be anything like that. But in this example, I'm going to step you through an example of 2 different ways that the statement accounting process handles these things. So where we are in the overall flows, we've got a bank statement that's been loaded in. We run auto recon. And these items here got flagged as not found in system by the auto recon process. Okay, so the next thing that happens is statement accounting. Now, statement accounting is a set of rules that basically look at the activity types associated with those transactions, and it looks at the addenda, which is basically like a description that's on your BAI file associated with those transactions, right? So it's looking at these 2 things here on a bank statement to determine whether or not it can create an external transaction and a corresponding accounting template. Okay, and down here I have, basically the part of the criteria that this guy's looking at for those items is looking for items that are flagged as not found in system by the auto recon process, right? So when a statement accounting rule is configured, it looks much like this, right? I've got my activity type that's associated with this bank account, okay? And then down here in the bottom left, I've got a match value. This match value corresponds to the addenda of the item that's on my bank statement, right? So the way that this gets used is when I run statement accounting is going to look for things that have a not found in system status. of those items, if it has an activity type, if those items have an activity type, it's going to use this rule, right? And when it's using this rule, it's going to look for this in the addenda. Now, if it finds it, it's going to create an external transaction with this accounting template, and it's going to mark it as reconciled. It's going to stage up data for automated accounting to create an accounting entry for that reconciled item. If it does not find it, or if it doesn't find this addenda, but it matches on the activity type, I'm going to get the default. So I'm going to show you what happens when we match and what happens when we don't match. Okay. So back over here, this is the bank statement that I have out here. And this is what this bank statement would look like after auto recon is run, right? These items are flagged as not found in system, and they have an activity type of BKZBA. And I have one item here with an addenda of accounting test and another one with an addenda of accounting one, right? So let's look back at our rules for just a moment. Here's my activity type of BKZBA. I've got a match value down here of accounting one, right? So only one of these guys, this guy here for the $1 million, is going to create an external transaction and reconcile. This other guy up here for 650,000 is going to create an external transaction because the activity type exists inside of my statement accounting rule, right? But he doesn't match on the addenda. So he's not going to reconcile them. He's going to create the external transaction. He's not going to reconcile them. And that's my opportunity to update that accounting template if I need to, okay, before I force reconcile them, right? So after I run statement accounting, this is what that the auto recon page would look like. Like, here's the same statement. I've got 4 transactions, only one of them reconciled. Now, if I click on my acceptance hyperlink here, you're going to see I've got one item over here that has an external transaction now associated with it, but this is the guy that didn't match on the addenda. The other guy, I had 4 transactions before. The one just before this, or in between these two, is fully reconciled now, right? And I'm going to step through what that looks like here. So when I have an item that's been an external transaction that's been fully reconciled, in other words, I matched on the addenda, here you're going to see, like in the transaction description, you're going to see like an audit trail. What rule was used, what match value was used, what accounting template is being used to book this entry, right? And of course, it says its status is reconciled. And when an item is reconciled, right? I've staged up an accounting event here to for the automated accounting process to pick this item up and book an entry based on this accounting template. Okay. If I get to this point and I realize, oh, I should be using a different accounting template for this, I can always change that here if need be. I can also click on this green icon here and see what the debit and credit look like on this accounting template. Okay. But if everything looks fine, what I can do then is have my automated accounting run. It's pretty straightforward. Enter my business unit, what sources. In this case, I just have bank statements flagged. But in a moment, when I start talking about wires and EFTs, you'll see we could be doing just bank transfers, or we can set this up however we need to, right? But once automated accounting runs, if I go back and I look at my accounting events, I will see that I've got, that item that created an accounting entry based on this template is marked as process. Okay. And this is all part of the month end. I'll give you guys like a month end checklist so that you'll know where to look so that none of these items are left hanging out here. Okay. But once the accounting entry is created, you can always come over to the accounting entries page over in cash management and see your accounting entry. Now, there's a few things to notice on this page here. First of all, this status up here is provisional, and I've highlighted it, right? And we also have a checkbox here for requires review. So what I'm showing you here is an accounting template that was created with a requires review flag. And why would I do that? Now, you don't have to do that for every one of these, but what this allows you to do when it requires review flag is checked on your accounting template is that it allows you to change the status of this item to provisional when it's created in your subledger, so that you have the opportunity then to make sure that the chart fill string for this entry is correct. If you don't want to add that extra step in there, you can have them created without the required review flag, and they'll just, then they're ready to be journal generated, right? If you are using this flag and it goes to provisional, in this page here, the only thing that you can really do is change the chart fill string. You can't finalize this item. In fact, if you try to finalize it, it'll tell you you need to do that in another page. We'll look at it in just a second. Okay. And the reason is for like segregation of duty purposes, right? So, but if everything looks okay here, you would come into the view approved entries page and finalize it. Here, you'll see you can finalize the entry, but you can't change any of the chart fill string. Okay. So I'll pause there. Is there any questions about any of that?
Sam, this is Lisa again.
Lisa.
I think you just answered what my questions were pertaining to whether or not somebody can change any of the fields or any of the dollar amounts. You said we could set it up so it does require the changes to be reviewed and approved by another person, right? So if somebody changed
Right.
like the base amount or the account ID or what have you.
That's right. And keep
Okay.
in mind, right now, I'm kind of contextualizing this around the bank reconciliation.
Mhm.
These accounting templates and everything get used all over cash management. In
Right.
a few minutes, in my next slide deck, I'll show you how accounting templates are used for wires and EFTs and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
But you always have that opportunity, especially if you have the requires review flag checked,
Okay.
to update that chart fill string, because there can be instances where like you're sweeping money from one account to another, or it was like a one-off, that happened at the bank, and it might not be. PeopleSoft might see that as something that gets treated, as you know, another sweep or something like that, when in reality it isn't, right? So if those accounting templates are associated to those particular transactions, like with the addenda, like I showed
Mhm.
before with statement
Mhm.
accounting, if you can identify them in the addenda to say, hey, this is something that we need to take a look at before it journal generates, you can flag, the requires review flag on that template, and kind of pump the brakes on that entry before it gets over to the GL,
Okay.
right? So, and again, it's all the actual handling of those entries is segregated out. So, or is segregated between two different parties typically. So you could update the chart fill string here, and then if it's okay, then come over to the view approve and finalize it. There's a difference between finalization and provisional. Provisional means that those entries, if the journal generator runs, it's not going to pick up this item, right?
Mhm.
Whereas the items that are flagged as final will get picked up and pulled over to the GL. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think
Okay,
it covers what I'm trying to cover, which is like you said, the segregation of duties.
exactly.
So
Yeah,
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 I think I'm good theoretically.
awesome. Okay. Um, so that takes care of like the day to day. Like when you load in your bank statement, you do your reconciliations, work your exceptions, create your accounting entries, everything gets moved over to the GL. However, um, at month end, you may want to do what's called book to bank reconciliation. For book to bank reconciliation, what we're really interested in doing is reconciling the cash differences, the cash at the bank with the cash on the general ledger, right? there can be things that would cause those to be different. Payments in transit, deposits in transit, any kind of unbooked payments, things like that that would cause, these two amounts to not be the same, right? What this process does, or this functionality does, there's another app engine that you would run that would allow you to select the bank statement that you want to use for your ending cash balance at the bank, right? And it would compare that balance to the general ledger balance and give you, what your payments in transit are, deposits in transit, all those things that could cause any kind of difference between the two, right? And give you a book to bank difference. Now, once those items are reconciled, you click the confirm button here and you can print out a report if you want to. This format here is pretty standard. I mean, you can probably remember from your accounting classes and things like that in college, you went through something very similar to this, right? When you click on your report here, it's going to give you this page. It's also going to give you the detail that's behind each one of these little post-it note kind of icons here. So this payments in transit would almost be like an outstanding payments register, right? Same thing with your deposits, right? But it's going to give you all the detail behind what you're seeing here on that report. And of course, you can always drill down into it. Like if you clicked on this button here, it would open it up and show you what makes up the total that you're seeing. Okay, but this is a huge time saver. It can be, depending on how many different accounts you have to reconcile at the end of the month, and how much time it takes you to get all of this information when you're trying to reconcile the differences, the cash differences. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay. So now I am going to try to switch over to my other. Over to my other slide deck here. All right. That worked. Okay. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about wires and EFTs. You can see I've got a number of different steps here, kind of the same format of what we were doing before. But here I'm going to start off with, the creation of a wire or EFT template, how those are get entered into PeopleSoft, settlement manager, which is kind of like the cash management equivalent of the AP pay cycle, how that communicates over to the financial gateway, the accounting events, very similar to what we were just looking at for the auto reconciliation, or I'm sorry, statement accounting, when we're using the accounting events data to create accounting entries over in Treasury Subledger, and automated accounting picks these guys up, and we'll come right back to where we were earlier, Lisa, with the finalized accounting entries and that sort of thing, right?
Cool,
And then
thanks.
at the end of all of this, I'll talk a little bit about acknowledgments and confirmations. That was another topic that came up during our previous call. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Awesome. So to begin with, I'd like to make a small distinction between BAX and EFT transactions inside of cash management. A BAX is typically a bank-to-bank transfer. In other words, I'm moving money from an external bank account that I own to another external bank account that I own, and they're both configured in PeopleSoft. These transactions here are very straightforward. PeopleSoft already knows what the chart fill strings are that are associated to both of these bank accounts, right? The money, where the money's coming from, where it's going to, right? So this is pretty straightforward, and you'll see it's pretty much a one pager. This guy here, though, for EFTs, I'm moving money from an external bank account that I own to another financial institution, typically, right? I mean, you could use it to, make, I don't know, tax payments or what have you. But typically those kinds of transactions are coming out of AP because there's a liability associated with them. If I'm moving money from an external bank account to like fund a pension account or something like that, more typical to what you might find for these types of transactions, right? But there's an accounting template that can be associated to this transaction, right? And down here I have, there's a lot of different layouts that can be used. You can, of course, use regular ACH type nacho formatted files, which you may be already using, CCD, PPD, CTX, all those kinds of things. You can also do EDI 820s, ISO formats, Swift formats, whatever really works best for you. And there's advantages to using different formats, right? But just to kind of baseline some of the things that we'll be talking about here in just a second. So on a bank transfer template, right? It's pretty straightforward. I just enter in, what my bank account information, the payment method, the layout that I want to use, and that's pretty much it. I mean, there's not a whole lot else on this page. If I wanted to have a set amount for every time that this transfer is used, I could do that, but I don't have to, right? These templates are, basically whatever I want to have replicated every time I use this template, right? All these fields. So that is a little bit different than my EFT template. You can see I've got more tabs up here, and there's more data that's being captured, but it's very similar, right? The difference is really in the beneficiary, who's receiving it, right? That sort of thing. You also notice over here, I can apply template security to this, or field security to this template. So what that allows me to do is to lock down the account and any, the accounting template, anything. I could basically lock down anything except for maybe the amount and the date, right? The rest of it could be, like if I have settlement instructions over here on this tab that I want to be used for this template, I could lock that down and no one would be able to change it. Okay. But after I create these templates, we also have an approval page, right? So, but once it's been approved, it's very simple. Just click here, click approved, it's done, right? It's ready for use. So I have a template that's been approved. And let me back up just a second. Here's where I would create my accounting template, right? And the accounting templates, whether you're using them for wires and EFTs or using them for bank recon, like we were looking at before, it all looks the same, right? In other words, this page here is used to create an accounting template that could be used for either wires or bank reconciliation. It doesn't matter, right? And here's that requires review flag that I was talking about before. You would create your entry down here. One of the key distinctions to notice is that down here I've got two different options really on this part of this entry. One of them says bank account, right? And so if for this part of this entry, this chart fill string is actually coming from my external bank account configuration, right? On that first page at the very bottom, I've got a scroll buffer there where I can determine, or I can set my chart fill string for that bank account, right? For the cash chart fill string. Down here, I can specify the chart fill string that I want the other side of the entry, right? So I'm crediting, this chart fill string on my bank account, and then I'm debiting something else, right? And this can always be different. Now, why would I want to do that? You'll notice up here, all of this is organized by set ID, right? So that means that this accounting template can be shared amongst all of my different bank accounts. So I set it up one time and I can share it, right? That means if I had specified here chart field explicit for the credit side, and I know this is always going to be the cash out of my entry, then if I ever had a change in my chart fill string, I'd have to come out and change every single one of these accounting templates, and I'd have to have a different one for every bank account. Using the templates this way allows me to make this much more dynamic. So I only have to update that chart fill string in one place for the cash side, right? So just keep in mind, these accounting templates can be used in a lot of different ways. We're just talking about basically two different ways of using them today, right? So any questions about that before I move on? I know I'm talking kind of fast here, guys. I want to get through everything, so I apologize. And we can, if you guys have questions later, I'm happy to, give you guys more time if need be. Okay. So this is what a bank transfer when I'm moving from money from one bank account that I own to another bank account that I own, right? You see, it's just like I mentioned before, it's a one pager. There's not a whole lot of other things. And in this case, I've got an example here of what it would look like if you were doing this ad hoc. I don't have a template specified here. I could use the template that we were looking at before, but it's just as simple to enter it, this way as well. You enter in the bank account that money's coming from, where it's going to, how much it's for, the transaction date, save it, you're pretty much done, or in the layout, and you're done, right? A similar thing for EFTs. However, there is a bit more data here, right? Because the beneficiary of the payment doesn't exist in an external bank account. We can't use the previous screen that we were looking at. So here we've got, where the money's coming from, who the beneficiary of the payment is, but, similar information, got the accounting template, the dates, all that sort of thing, the layout, all of that's captured here, right? And also, if there needs to be any kind of attachment, sometimes I've had clients in the past that when they're doing these types of payments or these types of disbursements, um, they go through certain types of audits. If it's over a certain dollar threshold, right? And if that's the case, and you want to attach like a PDF or whatever it's for, you can certainly do that. Okay. Now, after the wires and EFTs have been entered into cash management, we have mentioned before the settlement manager, right? And here I have that it's mainly used for selection, approval, and dispatch, right? It's moving it through a process here. So we don't need to focus on the deals. We're not doing deals, not in this call. But so when a previously entered wire or EFT is selected, you would come in here, just click on this drop down up here to show you the range of wires and EFTs that are available for selection, right? But if you click on this hyperlink here, it's going to open up a page that looks like this, right? And it's really simple. I may have entered in a wire, like if I already know that I've got a wire that needs to be dispatched like next Monday, right? I can go ahead and enter that in there and just have it sitting there ready for release. It doesn't really get to the approval stage until I select it though. So if I'm ready for it to be approved, I can go ahead and select the item here, and then there's a button at the bottom that moves it on from the selection process to the approval process, right? So in the approval process, that selected wire or EFT would show up here, right? And whoever's doing the approval would click on the hyperlink here to open this page, right? So once it comes into here, it's a similar process. You would select it if it's being approved. You would select it and then click approved, and then it moves it down to the dispatch, right? Once it's been approved, it moves over to the payment dispatch page over in the financial gateway, same as you're probably already doing with AP payments, right? So everything gets dispatched from the same piece of functionality, right? After everything has been dispatched, right? And it's marked as paid. Over here, this is earlier we were looking at accounting events for the bank reconciliation, right? We were looking at this tab for bank statements, right? Anytime you see BSP, think bank statement processing. Okay. These accounting events in this tab relate to my transfers, right? Whether it's a wire or an EFT or what have you. But same kind of status over here of not processed, right? In other words, this data is ready to be picked up by automated accounting and create accounting entries for me, right? And then once, oh, also I have an extra slide here. I can also, you remember earlier I said when we were looking at the accounting events for bank statements, that you could change the accounting template. Well, same thing here. Whoever has access to this page could update this accounting template if it needs to be before it gets picked up by automated accounting, right? And same thing here. You can click on the screen icon and see what that accounting entry looks like, if need be, or that accounting template, what that accounting template looks like. Okay. So, but after I have that data all entered in there and I've got my accounting events ready to be picked up by automated accounting and create the accounting entries for me, I'm running a very, a similar process as to what we were looking at before with bank reconciliation, right? And then it creates my accounting entry, right? Very, very similar. Everything's pretty much following the same funnel of creating the accounting entries over in my subledger. Okay. Any questions about any of that?
Hey,
Okay.
Sam, I'm
Uh-huh.
not, this is Lisa again. Sorry, I'm the internal auditor with all the questions.
That's okay. That's all right.
So what I'm gathering is that this is going to replace our AP wiring module functionality, what have you. Is there then a way to attach like the invoice or, the records that we're paying through here rather than AP into this module? I don't exactly know if I'm explaining it right, but
So yeah, so for if there's a liability associated with a disbursement of cash, I
Mhm.
would highly recommend recording that in accounts payable.
Okay.
Over here in cash management, we're not the movement of money that we would do that would be different than accounts payable is like funding, a retirement account, some investment account, money that might be drawn down on earlier, like, if there's a money market account, that sort of thing, right? There's not a liability associated with that transfer of money, right?
Okay.
When you're that's very different
Okay.
than like paying a supplier, right?
Okay.
I would record that over in AP because I want AP to record the liability and then the payment
Right.
against that liability, right?
Gotcha.
So they're wires, but they're handled two different ways. I wouldn't want to put a funding for a pension account in my AP module, right? Because there's really no liability associated with that, or not. Maybe that's a bad example. A sweep of money to an investment account, right? I don't have a liability associated with my investments, right?
Mhm.
So I don't want to overstate my liabilities by putting that in there, and then have to weed back through and make adjustments on the journal entries and that sort of thing. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I thought
So
I was originally looking at this as a replacement for the AP wire functionality, but no, that makes sense. That's what I was getting at. I'm like, well, how are we then attaching like the cost centers and the invoices? I was just going down a rabbit hole for a second in my head. Okay.
no worries.
All right. So,
Yeah. So if there was ever a need to, like, since these types of wires tend to be very high dollar, right?
Mhm.
Like if I'm moving money over to an investment account, and maybe it's like 50 million or whatever,
Mhm.
there may my business may require a certain amount of due diligence and approval,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
So I can always associate a PDF to that transaction and create an audit trail, right? Of what it was for, here's my documentation, here's who approved it, and all that sort of thing, right?
Yep.
So,
And then this is the same. And there's a separate, like for instance, for that $50 million, sweep or what have you, there's going to be a separate preparer and a separate approver.
right,
On it.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the person who enters in the wire would not normally be the same person who approves it.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
So it's totally segregated out, and it works. It flows through the settlement manager that way, right? You got different sections in that page. So
Okay. Thank you.
This is Joanne. I had a question on the wires for AP. We talked about kind of changing that process and processing it through PeopleSoft.
mhm.
Would that be a different module? So we're not, kind of separate systems right now. Right now we're taking it off. We're going to the portal and, doing the payment and then having to manually book on the
Right.
AP side.
Okay.
This,
So-
not necessarily this portion, but PeopleSoft cache module does have the option to pull all that into PeopleSoft, right?
Yeah. So if you wanted to do wires out of AP, right? So let's think about it. It's the process could be very similar to ACHs that you're currently doing. Okay. So for example, I'm sorry, was there someone? Okay. So for example, if when you entered a voucher, right? And you've got when you enter a voucher, you've got the payment tab there where you kind of record it, like if you were recording a manual payment, you would record it there, right? Um, your ACH is going to default if we were paying them by the payment method of ACH would default from your configuration. Now, you could override that with wire instead of ACH or check, right? In other words, if I'm making a $1 million payment, right, to the supplier, and since it's so high dollar, I want to be able to trace that through the FedWire system because I've got much more traceability through the FedWire system than I do through the ACH network, right? So since it's so high dollar, if I wanted to change that to wire, I can. Now you have to be set up and approved by the bank to do that, right? But the overall process would be the same, right? You would update that to wire. It would communicate over to the financial gateway. You'd have your banking integrations layout set up for wire for that bank and that bank account, and it would just create an extra file for you, right? So that's how it could happen out of AP. What I was showing earlier is how we would move money from, one bank account or financial institution to another, right, inside of cash management. But you could do something very similar for wires out of AP if need be. Any other questions here? Did I lose you guys? I hope
Nope,
not.
nope,
I've had
nope, I'm still here. No questions from me though.
I've had enough computer problems this morning. Okay. Just a few more things here. Before we were talking about acknowledgements and confirmations, right? So I have a slide here. Hey, what happens next after payments get sent to the bank, right? And this is true whether we're talking about this, payments coming out of cash management or accounts payable. It doesn't matter, right? All of it is coming through the financial gateway. So the financial gateway has the capability of loading acknowledgement and confirmation files, right? An acknowledgement is an acknowledgement of receipt, right? The bank gets your file and they say, oh, we got it. It looks like it's formatted fine, and we'll send it on to the ACH network here in just a moment. Now, when the confirmation of those files comes back to you, what that means is that file, that all of those payments in your payment file have been sent to the ACH network, and it was accepted by the ACH network, right? So they have two different functions. They do two different things. This is an acknowledgement by your bank that they've received the file and done some cursory formatting, um, or they've looked at the format of your file and it looks fine. The confirmation file means that it's actually been accepted by the ACH network, right? And there's pros and cons for using them or not using them. Okay, and I'm going to step through that here in the next 5 minutes. Okay, so fortunately, I'm at the end of my slide deck here. Um, so if we aren't using acknowledgements and confirmations, we're dispatching payments out of the financial gateway. They get sent to the bank, right? These payments are marked as paid immediately, right? And then I see the payments get cleared in my BAI file, and I reconcile them, right? Now, this is a little different than if I'm using acknowledgements and confirmations. I've got two extra steps in here. So if I'm using acknowledgements and confirmations, I dispatch from the financial gateway. Those items at that point are marked as sent to bank, right, in the financial gateway. Then when I receive my acknowledgement file, here I have, for example, ADI 997 file, and I load that into the financial gateway, it marks those payments as received by bank, right? It means that the bank has acknowledged receipt of those payments. Once I receive a confirmation file from the bank, it gets updated to paid, right? And we'll talk about what that means in just a moment. Then, the other steps are the same. I run my BAI reconciliation, or I load my BAI file, I run my reconciliation. Okay. So why would I go through these extra two steps here to load an acknowledgement and a confirmation file? Well, there's a couple of different reasons. First of all, this gives me visibility, automated visibility of what's happening with this payment after it leaves my system, right? The bank can communicate to me and I can update the payments in the financial gateway to, for what's happening outside of the system. Therefore, the status of this more closely mirrors what's happening at the bank. Okay. So when you have an item that is marked as paid in the financial gateway, um, that means if I'm doing, for example, an AP ACH, when it's marked as paid, then I can go ahead and send my remittance devices to the suppliers, right? Until it's actually received and confirmed by the ACH network. In other words, they've accepted it. I don't really have a payment out there for a supplier to expect, right? There could be, this payment might have, a tilde in the name, or it could, any number of an exclamation point in the account number, and they'll go, no, you got to fix this, right? So if I had already communicated to the supplier that, hey, we're wiring you, or we're sending you $50,000 via ACH, that wouldn't necessarily be true, right? So it helps to coordinate, all of the functionality around the payments when you're loading these two files. The other thing is that if I'm doing a wire out of cash management, I don't actually book an entry over in my Treasury subledger until it's been marked as paid, right? If I'm doing a wire, and it's just sitting there. No, in other words, before we saw with the settlement manager, a wire can be entered. It can, and it goes through, selection process, approval process, then it goes over to the financial gateway for dispatch. Well, since it only gets, the accounting entry only gets created when this item is marked as paid in the financial gateway, I don't have to worry about, erroneously creating an accounting entry for that item, right? So there's a few different advantages to including these two extra steps. Now, on my last slide here, I do have, pros and cons kind of broken out, pretty much what I just mentioned, right? Um, with the acknowledgements and confirmations, well, I'm sorry, without the acknowledgements and confirmations, everything is marked as paid immediately. Accounting entries can be created immediately, but you don't have the same visibility in your system if you're not using them, right? You're relying on the bank to tell you if there's an issue, right? Or you send. When I say tell you, what I mean is a phone call, an email, that sort of thing. If you are using them, then you can also consider, the liquidity of your cash as to whether or not something's actually cleared or not, right? You can respond more quickly if you got bad account numbers. It'll update it in the financial gateway. You can see which item is actually causing a problem, right? And drill back into those items in the financial gateway. But there is a level of coordination that is required. You send a file, you receive 2 files back, and that sort of thing. So, are there any questions? I know I was talking pretty fast there, trying to get through all of this, but hopefully you guys found this useful.
Yeah, it looks really good to me. I'm excited about it.
Awesome, thank you.
It'll just
Yeah, I don't have
really,
any questions off the bat. I think it's more so like once you get your hands on it kind of thing for me personally.
yeah, and just the implementation, making sure everything's implemented nice and neat and buttoned up,
Absolutely.
Right.
like
Yeah.
Frank said,
Yeah,
that once you get into it, then, getting your hands on it, that's when
Yeah,
so
and
things might shake
I'm
out.
sorry.
I had two questions actually on that. Is there like a sandbox environment that you guys have that we might be able to just like play with? Would be the first question. The second question is, if we were to move forward with this, is this implementation something that you guys would be able to help us?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
We do this sort of thing all the time, right? And the way that we typically approach these types of things is to first start off. We'll give you a timeline. We kind of need to do an assessment to make sure that we're aligned on everything that you would like to do, and then give you a rollout. We do this piece first, we do this piece second, and methodically lead you to your ultimate end goal. But at the end of the day, what I think the clients really enjoy is a much more elegant way of kind of getting through your day. I mean, you're obviously, when you have this level of automation and you've got all of these pieces functioning for you, there's just a lot more elegance in the way that you're kind of getting through the things, and the things that you're spending your time on are the things that really need your attention, not the usual mundane kind of go here, click this. You're spending your time doing things that need your attention, right?
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
But yes, we would be more than happy to help you understand the timeline and do the implementation for you.
Yep.
We do it all
Hey,
the
Sam,
time.
it's Marcus. Hey,
Hey.
Sam, it's Marcus. And I just want to really say thanks for doing that. That was each one of these cash management demos. I learned more and more. So thanks again. I think maybe, I mean, we could very easily, we could turn around an SOW. I think we have a questionnaire, right? That we'd like to get our customers
Yeah.
to help us, right? So maybe just start with the questionnaire. If you can send that off to everyone on the call, and then they can get that completed. And then based on the questionnaire, we'll put a quick SOW together with the typical deliverables, the resources, the timeline, cost. And at that point, you guys should have enough data points to to at least have an idea as to what your PeopleSoft investment would be.
Yeah, that would be super helpful. Yeah, if you can send that over, Sam, I can
Yep.
Get it out to everybody and we can get that back to you guys.
Awesome. I'll send that questionnaire out this afternoon.
Yep.
And that would be, that would cover the implementation, right? Is that like?
Yeah, that would cover the implementation. I spoke to Mackenzie Germain. She's your Oracle accounts or applications unlimited rep. And one of two things, you can either purchase the cash management licenses, and I mean, I think depending on the number of users that you have just for cash management, I think it's a minimal amount. But one, you can either purchase through Oracle or you could purchase directly through us, and we could easily bundle that into the services as well. So we're happy to get you a quote, and I think the minimum is 5 user licenses for cash management. And frankly, a lot of organizations, that's about as many as they have working in their cash desk and treasury and AP. They're going to actually need access to cash management. So, but we're happy to work with you on the licensing as well.
Okay, great.
Okay. Yep, you bet.
Sounds good. All right. Well, then we'll just keep an eye out for the questionnaire, and then we'll turn that around as quickly as possible. But thank you both for your time, and Sam, great presentation. I think we learned a lot. So thank you so much for taking the time to walk us through it. And like I said, we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Once you send out that questionnaire, I'll circle back with this team, and then we'll fill it up.
Thank you
Cool.
so much.
Thanks,
Thank
Sam.
you guys so
Really
much.
good. Really
Thanks,
good
everyone.
stuff.
Great
Have a good day.
presentation.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.